A local middle school, their very first meeting, a mom who'd been on another team had the courage to say, hey, when are these after school academic supports? I want to take advantage of them. And one of the staff members said, oh, they're on our website. And then another colleague said, oh, actually, we haven't been updating them. And the principal was like, yeah, we need to do that. And then the mom bravely said, we're not going to check your website. And what emerged in the next 30, 40 minutes was we co-created what we called a frequently asked questions document.
Welcome to Aspire to Lead. That wonderful and impactful story was from Ari Gerzon-Kessler. Ari is a highly sought-after speaker, professional learning provider, and has the award-winning book called On the Same Team, Bringing Educators and Unrepresented Families Together. Before we dive into his conversation, I just wanted to let you know that we have, myself and Charlie Peck, an exciting event coming up in just a few days. If you're dealing with student behavior issues, we're going to be joining forces with some phenomenal experts at the Student Behavior Solutions Summit to give you practical strategies that will help you immediately in your classroom and in your schools. This live virtual event is free, and it's going to be taking place on Monday, September 30th from 5 p.m. to 9 p.m. Eastern Time. So don't miss out. Register at www.thrivingeducator.org/summit. And again, that's going to be September 30th, this upcoming Monday from 5 p.m. to 9 p.m. Eastern Time. Can't wait to see you there. There's going to be a whole host of speakers from Todd Neslony, Nathan Maynard, Charlie Peck, and myself, and so many more. But it doesn't stop there. You're going to get some additional video support from a bunch of additional speakers after the event to make sure that you are getting wisdom and insight for student behavior. All right, my guest today, Ari, has 2 decades of experience as an educator, including time as a bilingual teacher and principal. He's been dedicated to forging stronger school-family partnerships and dismantling inequitable practices in education. Currently leading the Family Partnerships Department for Boulder Valley School District, Ari brings a wealth of knowledge and insights into creating meaningful connections between educators and families. Can't wait to dive into this conversation as we're going to be exploring his groundbreaking work and the powerful strategies schools can use to build these vital relationships. Welcome back, everyone, to Aspire to Lead, where we will be discussing the visions, inspirations, and experiences from top educational leaders. My name is Joshua Stamper, and you can connect with me on Twitter or on Instagram at Joshua_Stamper. Aspire leaders and Teach Better family, thank you so much once again for joining Aspire to Lead this week. And as always, I just am so fortunate to meet phenomenal educators and leaders and have an opportunity to amplify their voice on the podcast. And Ari Gerzon-Kessler is one of those. I have his book in hand. I've looked at it extensively, and it is thorough, it is brilliant, it's extremely helpful, and I'm kind of kicking myself I didn't have this resource as an administrator on the campus. But we're going to be talking about this book and a lot more variety of different topics on just kind of the current reality of the family involvement and making sure that we're having authentic partnerships with those, not only with our parents, our students, but then also our community. And I think Ari is just a brilliant mind, and I'm so excited to have him on the show. So with that, Ari, thank you so much for being on Aspire to Lead.
Thanks so much for the invite, Josh. It's really great to join you, and I'm looking forward to a dynamic conversation.
Definitely. And you're in Colorado, which I absolutely love.
It's been home for more than half my life, and I absolutely love it.
Well, I could talk about Colorado all day, and my listeners know that my family and I are absolutely enthralled with this area. But I wanted to talk about you. I want to know about your background, both in education and leadership, and just know more about your story.
Yeah, thanks. You know, when I was an undergrad, I volunteered for 4 years at a Head Start with young kids and really saw that it brought a joy. And so that was kind of a key seed. My older brother was doing Teach for America in Mississippi, and I spent 2 straight spring breaks visiting his classrooms. And then it was interesting, Josh, I kind of held off on becoming an educator because my older brother all along throughout childhood said, from ice cream choices to things, hey, don't copy me. Like, don't. So it's like, okay, I feel a calling, but I can't do the same thing. But then what happened was I was working briefly as an oral historian, interviewing older people about their lives. And my final project was doing an oral history of a high school, a kind of innovative high school in Boulder, Colorado, on its 10th anniversary. And in interviewing the teachers and the principal over several months, I was inspired, and I realized this is what I'm meant to do. And I was only 22 at the time. And so I quickly found a job as a high school Spanish teacher and spent many years in the classroom and had such a hunger around both best practice as well as what we could learn from business and other realms to effectively, engage students in the classroom. So I really was fascinated with leadership from a really early age. And, the short version is then worked at the lowest performing school in our county. My students were thriving, especially as I implemented a lot of the social emotional learning practices that kind of my mom's life was devoted to. And then school leadership was a natural calling. I wanted to keep growing, and spent a decade as a school leader, as an AP and principal at the elementary level. Learned a lot, and after about 10 years, I think, reached a spot of both burnout as well as there's something next for me. Took some time off to kind of write a book for a few months that I self-published. And in that time, I reflected and I realized one of the things, in addition to SEL and equity, one of the things I was most proud of from my principal years was around forging stronger ties with families. And even though, and I'll share, even though I have a number of regrets, like you were alluding to, of like, wish I would have known this when I was a principal, a couple of things we did made a huge difference, especially in the last principalship I had, where families really had experienced a broken level of trust for years at the school. And to do things like positive phone calls consistently each week, do an award ceremony around character and academics each month for 25 students and their families. Practices like that really illuminated to me, wow, there's more potential here for schools to do so much in an efficient way. So that's kind of my educational journey. And I've been the last 7+ years leading the family partnerships department for a district here with 56 schools, and been just loving the blend of immersing myself in the research, practicing it on the ground with schools, and just continuing that cycle of learning. So that's a little bit about I guess it's been about 23, 24 years in education.
No, that's awesome. So I want to talk about your book more, and I showed it on the screen earlier on the same team. Love the cover, by the way, too. I just want to talk about kind of setting the stage because, right away in the book, I just loved how you kind of framed how things are in our current reality with that partnership, or maybe lack thereof, of kind of like society as a whole, of how they view schools, teachers, leadership, but then also just how folks are feeling also in that role. And so if you wouldn't mind just sharing a little bit about where people are at right now and your book and this topic specifically.
Yeah, I mean, the first thought that comes to mind, Josh, is just thinking about how the pandemic really revealed how much we can benefit from forging stronger ties with families. And then, of course, families developed a better sense and more compassion for the life of our educators as they were able to watch from their living room, school in action. And so when I was writing the book, it was really during this crossroads in some ways in education where it felt like, wow, we have an opportunity here to really forge stronger ties. I often say that, like, despite best intentions, most schools in our country, and I would say probably globally as well, are still stuck more in the family involvement approach, which tends to be more focused on events and judging families' engagement based on did they come to back to school night or conferences, and less relationship centered. And one of my biggest hopes is that the field and every school in our country begins to prioritize relationship building, because then the benefits just are countless. So it's really seeing schools, the bulk of schools, more in that event focused, also more in the one-way communication. A big part of the work I do to support and train school leaders and educators in different systems is how do we foster more effective two-way communication that leads to greater trust. And a lot of our approach to families can be transactional, and so really shifting that to how do we make it more collaborative. I mean, the research shows that on one hand, if we have stronger ties as educators with families, we stay in the profession longer, we stay at our school for more years. But the research also shows that we, as educators, the area we feel least confident is in connecting with parents. So it makes sense that we need support, coaching, training, and we need practices, really efficient, meaningful practices, such as relationship-centered home visits or positive calls that rapidly build our ties with families. So that's kind of, I'd say, context. Do you want me to jump into the teams a little bit?
Yeah, so I was going to bridge that, yeah, perfectly. So Ari, I know you talked a little bit right now about family involvement. I'm just like shaking my head vigorously because it's true. It's very transactional. Come to the campus, we want something from you, or we also make judgments on parents based on how their attendance rate is on the various school events that we offer. So instead of focusing, as far as our administrators and our leaders in family involvement, what does that authentic partnership truly look like? And what are you trying to build on your campus, or what have you built, in the past when you were an administrator?
Yeah, great question. I mean, I think in terms of authentic partnerships, as I was mentioning, that prioritizing relationships, trust, and communication. And one example, concrete one, is a number of our schools to this day will say, well, we send the email once a week to families, or we send the newsletter. But as we've been diving deeper, Josh, on these teams, we find out more than half the families in a certain classroom don't read a single email from the school or district, or the newsletter is intimidating and overwhelming at 9 pages. So one thing our Families and Educator Together teams have done, which really are bringing families and underrepresented families and educators and school leaders in one room over a meal once a month, the really clear intentional structure, is we're illuminating things like, hey, please text us, don't email us. And then it's, we can get the staff to organically over time spread the use of an app like Talking Points, where language no longer is a barrier. And we're getting maybe, an array of text back from families we used to call hard to reach or non-responsive. And we're getting families' input on, actually, a 2-page newsletter is fine. And oh boy, it'd be so nice if at the end of school, most teachers would spend the 5 minutes hanging out outside their classroom to give us that in-person opportunity. So some of it, Josh, I mean, almost sounds obvious or fundamental, but just one other quick example at our local large high school where I graduated from a few decades ago, particularly our Spanish-speaking families have felt marginalized for decades. And one thing they told us last year was, hey, we don't contact the staff because we don't know how to. And all it took was about a half an hour of work of a directory of the names of the staff, their phone extensions, their email addresses, and a symbol to recognize who is bilingual and who isn't. And now they're able to reach out with much greater ease. So those are some of the pieces in terms of authentic partnerships, that it's truly forging collaboration that honors everyone as experts in their roles, not we're the powerful, educators, come learn from us. It's a real paradigm shift, I think.
Yeah, I love that area that you were talking about with the bilingual and making sure that you have a contact person. We did that because we were failing our community. We had, probably about 30% of our population in Dallas was Hispanic, and they didn't know the point person. They didn't know who was bilingual. And by just letting the families know who you can contact, just to have that conversation to then relay it to us as administrators, was a game changer for us. And it totally changed the relationship that we had with that community specifically.
This podcast is a proud member of the Teach Better Podcast Network. Better today, better tomorrow, and the podcast to get you there. You can find out more at teachbetter.com/podcast. Now let's get back to the episode.
All right, I want to talk real quick about kind of what you talked about with families maybe feeling that disconnect with the campus, right? And I'm going to throw an example out, and I don't know if this is in line with what you're talking about, but for us, we had a lot of communities that just didn't feel comfortable even coming to the campus for a variety of different reasons, but a lot of it had a negative perception of the school in general. And so what we were trying to do as a campus was similar to what you're talking about with like home visits, is like go to them, right? So, going to the apartment complexes and having an event there, and having a Q&A, and having our teachers and the administrators there just to be in person so they could have those one-on-one conversations, but then also let them know we value you, and we're going to do that with food and with our presence. And it's just kind of a meet and greet. It's not like we want anything from you. I don't know if there's other examples about, kind of that sustaining that partnership, but do you have some other pieces that might work for administrators to kind of build a really strong relationship with our parents?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, a couple that come to mind. One is thinking about some of our local middle and high schools where they've implemented neighborhood walks in August of just almost like a mini home visit, quickly checking in and bringing staff and devoting that time. Another huge piece that I'm seeing really take off in schools, and I'd say, Josh, one of my biggest learnings the last couple of years has been when school leaders carve out the time, and it can be as little as 10 or 15 minutes, it helps the staff become more familiar and find more joy and meaning in some of these family engagement best practices. And that when the time isn't built, of course, there's a few champions, but it does not grow and have as lasting of an impact. So that, links to, for me, a number of our families and educator together, which I'll just call FET because that's what we call it for short. The FET teams have sparked families saying, hey, I don't want the first call to be about discipline or behavior or something that's problematic. I'd love to hear good news from the school. So a number of the schools I coach have had 15 minutes designated once a month for a staff meeting to end early. And folks go back to their classroom, pick up the phone, and make 2 or 3 positive phone calls. Or they use that time to write positive postcards. And that's just made a huge difference for families to have that initial connection be a positive one in August or September. And you mentioned home visits. I mean, I've identified over the years, what are the 3 to 5 practices that I've seen be most impactful with the smallest amount of time and effort. And home visits is definitely one of those that just, as you said, meeting families where they are makes it much more likely that A, they're going to reach out and communicate throughout the school year, and B, make them feel more comfortable to come into school where they already have a familiar face. And home visits captures kind of the spirit of authentic partnerships in terms of, as you were talking about earlier, really like taking off our expert hat. And it should feel like new or old friends meeting over coffee when that home visit happens, that it's not talking about academics, it's asking families about their hopes and dreams, and really shifting our normal way of operating as educators in terms of listening more than half of the time when we're connecting with those families.
Yeah, it's so true. We, at another campus, another city, there in Frisco, we did that for our 6th graders, and then anyone that was transferring into the school for 7th and 8th grade. And we had teams, right? So we had maybe 2 or 3 people on a team, and they would go out, and we had T-shirts for the incoming 6th graders to represent themselves. So they had some type of swag to start off on day one. And then, man, the families were just so generous with their time and come on in. You want some coffee? Do you want some, something to drink? And just the joy on their face to see someone from the school there specifically to meet their kid meant the world to them. And then they had a connection point too. And I know, for my home visits that I did in the summer prior to school, the families that I always met with, they always called at some point in the year. And it was so much easier to have a conversation, especially if it was something that was maybe started off negative, or maybe it was a problem that we needed to kind of work through. But we had something that was some background conversations and getting to know each other on a personal level to make it so it was easier to find that answer through that conversation. So there's a lot of power in those visits.
Yeah. Well, and you're reminding me too that for schools that maybe don't have the time to do home visits, or it's tricky to carve out, that welcome phone calls is another. That was something I did my 3rd year in the classroom. And I was amazed to see that year the much stronger connection I had with families, and the much higher academic outcomes of my students, because I was able to draw more on that partnership. So welcome calls is another great approach. And I mean, that's typically, it's like a 2 to 3 minute call, and you can maybe batch 5 one day and another 5. And so, yeah, that personalized communication just makes such a difference.
Yeah, I've lived that myself. It's amazing to have a parent be, and sometimes it's sad too, of like, I've never gotten a positive phone call from a school about my child. This, and it makes their day, it makes their year. And then that buy-in, not only from the parent, but the child, is huge. And like you said, it only takes a couple minutes.
Exactly. Yeah.
All right, Ari, I'm going to pause real quick because, I mean, you've probably seen me do it. I know for those who are watching on YouTube, I was slamming this magic mind. So talking about personalization, I just want to talk about like personal health real quick, because this drink is phenomenal. It sharpens my mind. It lowers my stress, gives me energy, something that I definitely need as I'm traveling and speaking, or getting on the podcast with phenomenal guests like Ari. But I wanted to make sure that you all understand that there's a ton of natural ingredients. And I'm just going to mention a couple real quick. They got organic lion's mane mushrooms in there, which encourages cellular growth, working memory, supports cognitive processing, enhances your mood. And there's also organic cordyceps mushrooms. It boosts endurance, fights fatigue, and it also helps enhance your immune system. And for those who have listened before, I've talked to you about feeling ill, taking Magic Mind, and getting better quicker. And I truly believe that. And it's because of the phenomenal organic ingredients in here. My wife now drinks it. my teenagers now drink it. So if that tells you something, if your teenagers are drinking something and saying how good it tastes, it's the truth, because they will be brutally honest to let you know if something tastes bad. So I love it. It's something I take every single day. I have a subscription. I'm going to throw up the website real quick for those who are watching on YouTube, but it's magicmind.com/aspire to lead. And then when you're in the checkout, make sure you're going and using the code aspire to lead 20. You'll not only get 20%, but if Magic Mind is running another promotion, it actually adds to the promotion. You get up to 48% off, which is a huge savings. And I love the subscription because it comes right to my door. If I ever want to cancel, it's super easy to do so. And then they give a money back guarantee, which I don't think you'll need because it is a phenomenal product and something that I feel great after taking. It makes me on point whenever I'm having a conversation or getting up and doing a keynote. So I hope everyone that is listening is jumping on that website, taking advantage of that subscription and the code. So again, magicmind.com/aspire to lead, code aspire to lead 20, and make sure you're getting all of those savings. All right. I'm not done with you, man. I want to keep jumping into this. You had talked about and I'm guessing it's an acronym, your FET team. I just want you to just kind of share where that came from and what that team's all about.
Yeah. No, I'm really passionate about the teams, and I've made it 80-90% of my role locally with the school district because it's been such a powerful vehicle to implement all these authentic partnership practices that can transform a school community. So basically the short version, Josh, which of course, on the same team, it walks readers through, the roots of the team, how to launch a team, how to be an effective team leader. But it was a pilot initially with 6 schools. And decades ago, this concept was born of action teams for partnership, but very few schools have them. It's usually a PTA, some sort of school accountability committee. Whereas the focus of our FET, Family and Educator Together teams, are really about hearing from voices that often have been unheard, that have been on the margins. Our school system, and I would venture to say most in our country, have for decades guessed what families needed instead of actually listening and acting on them, especially families, immigrant families, families of color. That's really the heart of our FET team. So the focus is really on deepening collaboration, access for them to learn more about how the school operates, because often they're unable to take advantage of opportunities for their kid because we've dropped something. I'll share a story about a middle school, but families don't know about a lot of the amazing things the school's offering because it was in an email and in only English. It's also a space for educators to learn from the insights and perspectives of families so that we can continue to make our schools more inclusive and truly collaborative. So basically, we had these teams at 6 schools, a lot of trial and error, learning what worked, what didn't. And in year 5, which was 2021, I saw that the new teams we launched at 4 schools were really thriving. And I think we finally figured out the secret sauce of how do you design a 90-minute gathering that's going to be really mutually fruitful and very engaging. And that's tricky at 6 o'clock at night sometimes for educators as well as for families. So basically, I saw the power these teams were having to be a vehicle for implementing a lot of the practices we were just talking about. And currently, we have 28 schools with teams, 28 that don't have a team. And what I see is that the schools with teams implement more meaningful changes in a year than the other schools do typically in 5 or 10 years. Because with the overwhelm of being an educator, the easier thing is just maintain our status quo approach to engaging with families. And these teams spread the number of champions. So it's not just that 1 or 2 special staff members that love partnering with families and maybe a school leader. The team begins to include, 5 to 10 staff members. More than half the staff participates at least once throughout the year. And we're able to just have these ongoing conversations about, hey, last month we talked, families said this. Have we shown follow through to maintain their trust and actually create the change we say we want? So basically, the teams have just been this powerful vehicle for creating the kind of change that I saw as a principal and teacher we can't carve out, or we don't carve out time to do when there isn't that team structure in place. So I felt really inspired, even though it was 9 o'clock at night when I was usually getting home from these gatherings, to start capturing stories and begin writing the book 3 years ago, because it just felt like this was a structure that pretty much every school community anywhere in the world needs to forge stronger ties. And the last thing I'll just say quickly before I forget it is, research out of the University of Chicago showed more than a decade ago that strong school family ties is one of the 5 key levers to move from a good to great school or system. Yet I will acknowledge as a principal, it was often maybe 25th or 30th. And it was always, oh, that'd be nice to do, but I'm putting out fires and we've got to focus on all these instructional pieces. And it was a lot of lost opportunities for the school communities that I led. So it's just been meaningful to see what a difference it makes when you've got a team.
Yeah, 100%. Because if it's important, then you're obviously going to be focusing on that. And, that's one thing to do it on your own as administrator, but you can only do so much. So you need to have more folks. And I love the idea that it's not only helping families out in the community, but it also helps those within your staff to get an understanding of the challenges and the things that are going on with families and in the community, which I think is extremely important, because I think that's kind of a missing component, especially when you're talking about just understanding and empathy in regards to what's going on behind the scenes in the lives of our kids and our parents.
Yeah, well, and you're sparking, Josh. I mean, 2 quick stories come to mind that I think listeners would really find meaningful. A local middle school, their very first meeting, a mom who'd been on another team had the courage to say, hey, when are these after school academic supports? I want to take advantage of them. And one of the staff members said, oh, they're on our website. And then another colleague said, oh, actually, we haven't been updating them. And the principal was like, yeah, we need to do that. And then the mom bravely said, we're not going to check your website. And what emerged in the next 30, 40 minutes was we co-created what we called a frequently asked questions document. It could be accessed on phones, through QR codes, printed copy, mailed to families, that was co-designed with families of what questions would a family most want to know the answers to really feel they know our school well and are connected. And then principal team leaders went off and answered those in the month between meetings. And then what was, I think, unique is that we didn't just come back and say, here's the product, hope it's useful. We got in small groups. We said, where is there language that's too verbose, unclear, too many acronyms and jargon? And family and educators sitting in small groups, jigsaw that. And we came back with a document that could be really meaningful to all families in that school community. And the other, example I wanted to share was at an elementary school. We were, I think, 1 or 2 months into the first year of their team. And we asked families a simple question of, hey, how were parent-teacher conferences for you last week? And this was a group of about 11 Spanish-speaking families. And they said they felt rushed. They felt like they were talked at a lot, that they didn't get to share really anything that they know about their own kids. And so we spent literally 30 minutes talking about what would be an optimal experience. And as a result, principal was hearing all those conversations. We made 2 really subtle, effective changes. One was for families with interpreters, we added 10 more minutes so it'd be more equitable. And then I wrote a piece for Edutopia that captures this training I do. It's literally 20 minutes for local schools or any school. And it's how do you make parent-teacher conferences more relational, reciprocal, and culturally responsive? And with those 20 minutes, what was beautiful to see was 4 months later, second round of conferences takes place at that school. We asked families the same question, and they say things like, I felt heard. It was really fruitful. The teachers really shared what I wanted to know, and we didn't spend time on things that weren't relevant or helpful. So it was, to me, a great example of something that's so fundamental to how we tend to engage with families, conferences. The small amount of time it took to truly transform them in a way that, and the educator said, I'm less exhausted. I didn't share a bunch of unnecessary things. And I feel like I really got to know how to be a better teacher because I know this student now better through the eyes of their family. So yeah, just wanted to share those as 2 examples of what surfaces in these team conversations.
Oh my goodness, 2 beautiful stories and extremely impactful. I think just easy changes that can be made, but make a huge impact in regards to not only the knowledge gain, but then the relationship being stronger, really. Ari, I want to talk about training. You obviously have talked through just how you're supporting schools in a variety of different ways, but I also know that you keynote, you provide full day trainings with professional development. So do you have any events coming up, and how do you support schools all over the country?
Yeah. I mean, it's where my passion is, because I'm excited to see schools and districts strengthen and deepen their efforts around family partnerships. So that's my core offering. I was helping districts throughout Texas last week in a 3-hour training around how do you implement high leverage, high impact family engagement strategies, and use it to reduce chronic absenteeism and support better relationships. So that's kind of my touchstone offering. And then I did a keynote recently in the Midwest on how do you build effective teams, just in general. What are the key ingredients for strong teams, based on about 20 years of research I've done, just being fascinated with both teams as well as leadership. And then I recently, a lot of my background, Josh, before focusing on family partnerships, was around social emotional learning and how do we create an engaging classroom. And another obviously very hot topic is how do we support students in this age of anxiety? I mean, Jonathan Haidt's new book, The Anxious Generation, as a great guide. So I also lead trainings around creating engaging classrooms and how do we help students manage anxiety and foster more well-being. So those are some of the key pieces. And I also lead trainings around relationship-centered home visits. That's something I really steep myself in so I could be a trainer myself. And then I obviously coach schools and districts around how do you launch these teams so that you have this structure. I mean, my hope is that down the road, 10, 20 years from now, they're kind of what PLCs are for teacher collaboration, right? What collaboration could be like between families and educators. So I have a ton of passion around supporting anyone who reads the book and says, hey, I'm really eager to put this into action.
Yeah. So Ari, I have the website that you have here for mediatorsfoundation.org, but will you just kind of talk about, for those who click on it, both in the show notes or on joshstamp.com to learn more about you, what are they going to find within this website?
Yeah. So the website gives a nice overview of particularly the school family partnership offerings. And then in the show notes, there's also a Google document that contains all the articles. I've written a number of articles in Edutopia and ASCD, even just this last year, on everything from what are some succinct ways to infuse positive communication more into your school's practices or your own individual practice as an educator, a piece on the difference between involvement and authentic partnerships, another article, 24 benefits of strengthening family partnerships. So that Google Doc in the show notes has a ton of articles, other conversations I've had that are just all free resources to support next steps. And it's easy to get in touch with me on LinkedIn. That's probably the best avenue, but my email is another great way, arigerzon@gmail.com. And I just, I'm loving traveling to different states and working with folks that are passionate about taking their work to the next level.
Love it. All right. So we're going to end with the question I love asking my guests here, which is kind of the baseline, right, of Aspire to Lead, which is, for those who are listening, if there's an actionable item, because it's great that they're listening. And again, they're wonderful knowledge in regards to authentic partnerships with families. But, if there's something they can do tomorrow or next week to enhance their leadership journey, what would you recommend?
Yeah, I mean, two thoughts are coming up. So two offerings. One would be check out the app talking points, because so many families are saying they want from school leaders, they want from staff more text messages, and talking points translates it all more than 150 languages. And it's just a seamless free tool. So that would be one. And then for school leaders in particular, carving out time, whether it's for positive postcards, text, or phone calls, literally starting with 15 minutes every 4 to 8 weeks for your staff. I mean, the power is, of course, if they go make 3 calls and there's 60 people on staff, you've just reached about 180 families that are being delighted at work or at home or on a car ride with the sudden surprise of delightful news about their kid. And that does not take a ton of PD or prep to just carve out those 15 minutes. So those would be, Josh, the two things that come to mind of immediate action steps.
Awesome. Ari, you had talked about LinkedIn and your email, but I want folks to be able to connect with you in a whole host of ways. So they can go over to joshstamper.com. I'm going to have links for not only your website, but also social media. We're also going to have email. And then, of course, what you were talking about with the free resources. So everyone loves free, and these are impactful resources that won't cost you a dime. So make sure you click on that. That'll be in the show notes also if you're on YouTube or if you're in a podcast app listening to the episode. But real quick, Ari, will you just give your email one more time for folks to be able to connect with you?
Yeah, so it's Ari, Ari Gerzon, Gerzon @gmail.com. And I also forgot to mention, Josh, that if you go to Solution Tree's website, my publisher for On the Same Team. While you can find it on Amazon and other places, Solution Tree has a ton of free reproducibles with a lot of the best resources and guides, one-pagers. So that's another wonderful set of free resources to draw upon.
Very cool. All right. So I keep holding up this phenomenal book for those who are watching on YouTube. Thank you for that. At Josh Stamper is the channel. Make sure you're pressing that subscribe, or if you're over at the Teach Better Team page, that is a growing community, and we appreciate you there too. But I wanted to just show the book one more time. So On the Same Team, bringing educators and underrepresented families together, a beautiful and phenomenal resource. Definitely check it out. The link will be in the show notes again. You can click on that and it'll go for you to be able to purchase. And then I just want to make one more note. Magic Mind is a wonderful product here that I use every single day. I want to make sure that you're heading over to magicmind.com/aspire-to-lead, code aspire-lead20 to get your 20% off, up to 48%. And I want you to make sure that you're using that to enhance your leadership journey too. So, Ari, it has just been wonderful to get to know you, listen to all the phenomenal things that you've been doing, not only as an administrator, but then also supporting districts all over the country. You are making a huge impact, my friend, and I just appreciate you so much.
Thank you so much, Josh. And thank you. I mean, you're impacting school communities far and wide. So just thank you for creating this space for us to be able to share and connect. I'm so grateful for all you're doing.